So, when is the spring season? Now, for those of us that have access, right, to the internet, you can easily look up when the spring is. You can Google it. I've already put it for reference. And everything that you see on this screen, Google it yourself. See if this is anything made up. Type in, when is the spring? Okay? It's showing you right here when the spring season is. Remember what we read about in Leviticus 23? These are the feasts, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. Okay? So, starting with spring, what is some of the primary high holy days that we must consider when we are in the spring season? Let's go to the next slide to figure it out, okay? So we understand that the spring is started by the spring equinox, okay? I'm not going to go into the detail of it, okay? I want to be able to keep it basic to be understood. But the spring equinox is what gives you a scientific reference of when the spring begins, okay? The spring equinox will give you a scientific reference of when the spring begins. But can you go off of the scientific reference alone in order to proclaim the season? According to the scriptures, the answer is no. Let's go into the book of Deuteronomy, 16th chapter, to get further understanding, okay? When the Lord showed us how to keep these feast days, he gave us very clear instructions on how to observe them. And when we observe feast days like the Passover, the Feast of Tabernacles, as well as other feasts, we have to make sure that we're doing it in alignment as the scriptures say, okay? Now, let's start with Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 1, so that way we can know how to proclaim the feast in its season.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 1.
Uh-huh.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night.
Okay. Now, we're commanded in this verse to do something very important. The first thing that we're commanded to do in this verse is to observe the month of Abib. Many of us skip straight to Passover and say, oh, well, when is Passover? When is the Passover high holy day? You can't get to the Passover until you first observe the month of Abib. Now, what does it mean to observe the month of Abib? Because Abib is the first biblical month of the year. Abib marks the biblical new year, okay? When you read about Abib in the Strong's, right, and we've made a reference here for you so that way you can look it up using your own concordance, the word Abib means green ear of corn. Now, when you link that up with having to observe the month of Abib, what we're being commanded to do is to be able to go outside and physically see greenery that's indicative of being in the spring. When we're being told in Deuteronomy 16 and verse 1, observe the month of Abib, it's telling you to notice the greenery that happens during the spring. Now, here's something you got to think about. Each season has its own unique characteristics, right? In the summer, it's hot as hell. Mm-hmm. In the winter, it's cold as hell, right? Just two basics. Spring is always known for its plush greenery. You know, during the winter months where the earth is predominated with more darkness than other seasons, you don't get the same type of crops. You don't have your livestock just out and about. There's a lot of growth and rejuvenation that happens starting in the spring. So when we're commanded to observe the month of Abib, we're being commanded to be able to look physically and observe the fact that there is so much greenery in our midst that this is showing us it is spring. Okay, now why is this important? We got to see who's thinking. Look at how it says, law number 2, it has to look like spring. Okay, that's the reason why we're being commanded to observe. You got to consider this, Azaniah. During the time where this book was written, was Google invented?
No, Google's something new on earth.
So we couldn't go on Google.com to find out when the spring equinox was. We couldn't go into a search engine and type up on our computer, when is the spring coming? You did not have that accessibility. So what did you have to do to determine the seasons? You had to physically see the characteristics that went along with the respective season. That's why it's telling us we have to observe. You can't just go off of, oh, okay, well, you know what? Well, this is March, so let me start counting. This is April. This is May. You can't just go off of that alone. You have to be able to physically see the greenery in order to be able to observe when the spring is happening. Now, I want to say one more point, and I'm going to pass it to you. You know, one other thing that would have made counting the days a little bit more challenging for our forefathers had they not understood what was told to them in Deuteronomy 16:1?
What's that?
How do you know how long a month is if you're going off the lunar cycle? The month is what determines the season when you read in the Bible. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go into that in a second. My question is, how do you know, right? No Google, no almanac, no this, no that. How do you know, with none of these resources, how long any 1 month is? So, for example, you could be living during the time of like February time frame. That's what we call it according to the Gregorian calendar, right? You could be around that time of the year. But what I'm saying is, you don't know that the spring is coming until it's observed. Go ahead. What was you about to say?
Well, I think that's just a good thought process to take into account. Doing some deductive reasoning, right?
Right.
It's two things that is happening here in this verse. It says, observe the month of Abib, comma, and keep the Passover.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to just keep the Passover without the observance of the
Right.
month of Abib. You have to do those two things in conjunction. And so, you know, for many people, it's all about the Passover and nothing about the month of Abib.
Mm-hmm.
But it's showing you that they go hand in hand, and they work cooperatively together to get us to the point where we're supposed to be keeping the feast of Passover.
And you bring up a good point, Azaniah, because, you know, many of us, you know, not having agricultural fields for ourselves and, you know, still trying to be able to rehearse these righteous acts in the last days, many of us don't see the correlation behind why it's necessary to observe the month of Abib before you proclaim the Passover feast. And we're going to go into that in today's lesson. But notice this. The definition of the word Abib is green ears of corn. You're being commanded to be able to go outside and see that type of greenery in order to proclaim the spring season. Okay? Now, I want you to look at the visual depiction of green ears of corn as you can see it on the screen. When you're looking at these green ears of corn, you're looking at developed grains that have been developed and nourished over time so that you know you're in the right season. You're not going to see this in the winter. You're not going to have the right climate in order to bring these things about. That's the reason why when we were given this law about observing it, this is how we would be able to know where we were at within the year. You go outside, you got greenery, okay, here we are, it's the spring. Look at these green ears of corn, look at how everything is so fresh, so plush. Okay, this is good weather for the animals to come out now. All of these things are indicative of the season, okay? Now, with that being said, let's go to the... Oh, you had something?
I just wanted to add this one piece. You make the comment, the definition of Abib is green ears of corn.
Correct.
Right? Now, that means this is the month of green ears of corn. The month of Abib is the month of green ears of corn.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is, it gets very specific, whether you see it or not. It's the green ears of corn, not just when it starts getting green outside,
Correct.
but when the corn itself is beginning to have green ears.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going more specific than just saying the grass is green.
Correct.
Just saying a few leaves have started to sprout, but the corn in itself the ears of the corn is becoming green.
Absolutely, bro. You on point. All praises.